It actually showed up there.
Yep.
All right. I can find it, make sure I didn't turn everything off doing this. I did, of course. Give me 2 seconds, I gotta find myself online. Doing so much other stuff. But this is my verse. I found last week, you know how crazy when you teach for a while, or don't teach for a while, you get very nervous. So I found Isaiah, actually the Lord gave me Isaiah 41:10. Lord said, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand." I thought, that's a cool one for standing up here in front of a bunch of people. So now let me try my other one. My drive, there it is. There we go. It was open, just closed down. Okay, so we knew last week we were talking about Paul. We kind of went through different things on Paul's life. But one of the things he emphasizes, and well, the whole thing that drove his life basically in the beginning was he was a Pharisee, okay? And I was like, you know, Pharisees and Sadducees and Sanhedrin, all those words passed by last week a little bit. I said, what exactly is a Pharisee? So, any ideas? I mean, what do you think a Pharisee is? Religious leader. Any qualifications for that? Lots of educated. They're very educated. We heard about, I'm just calling Gamaliel. I can't say his name right. He was like the, and all the other things I've read, he was like the number one theologian in the first century. So, and Paul taught under him. That probably gave a little weight to Paul's pride, you know, a little bit, stuff like that. But on here, this is just a quick one I actually found online. You're glad to be better than others. Why would you think that? Why would you think, I mean, they're funny, but they're true. Why do you think Pharisees think they're better than other people? They are very legalistic. And you might see it in there someplace else. You glory, huh?
When you followed the law, that was a measure of, you could visually see it.
Right.
But you couldn't see their heart, as Jesus would reprimand them over and over again for. But the more you kept the law, the better you looked, and the better you looked at others who didn't do it, and were able to say, thank God I'm not like that sinner.
And we know the Pharisees' law is a little bit, well, better than everybody else's law because God gave them, and they're trying to follow the law that God laid down a little bit. And you'll see, we'll find out that they took this to the extremes. I'll show you a little bit. You glory in your appearance than in the heart, like he just said, and you are quick to judge others, but blind to your own faults. And Jesus kind of pointed that out to him, right? So let's see if we can go forward to this one. Or not. You got to slide the cursor over to the...
Go ahead and say it, Jim. Get the PowerPoint going.
Jim, get the PowerPoint going.
There you go, Lee. Try it.
Okay.
Does it work? Does it work?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go. It's up. So we talked about Pharisees a little bit. We're going to talk about them a whole bunch, actually. Let's see. We pointed out that they're the religious leaders of their time. They are considered the educators. They're the theologians. They know the law inside and out. That's why we mentioned Paul could do so well when he debated other people. He had his Pharisee training. Okay. But they also believe that, as Marge pointed out, they need to keep the law and the traditions, okay, which made life a whole lot easier. The Pharisees were a respected group, as in any culture where leaders are of the type, especially with the Hebrew society where, again, everything's rooted on we are God's chosen people. These people are teaching God's word. These are educated people who know it inside out. So they're respected as, wow, they're respected in that for their education and for what people think they know. And again, but we pointed out they are just a little bit legalistic in that you got to follow all those laws. And we're going to find out how many laws there are in a minute, okay? Another part about the Pharisees, we're going to talk about Sadducees also. The Pharisees thought one way and Sadducees thought a slightly different way. Pharisees are like the progressive Christians, I guess, where the Sadducees are progressive, Pharisees, I'm tongue twisted tonight. Pharisees are more like the 1611 Bible type, you know, okay? But the Old Testament they had was first 5 books of the Bible, or the Pentateuch, written by Moses, okay? And that's what they had. They are, boom, this is what we are basing everything on. But they thought the temple itself was not necessary. And when we say temple, we are talking about Herod's temple number 2, the big thing in Jerusalem. Okay, that is the temple. What else did they have to go to then? We call them today, we call them the same thing, synagogues. Because you can't go to the temple, so you can go to the synagogues and hear the word from them. The other thing is the Pharisees didn't go to the synagogue or the temple. They weren't actually allowed in the temple. We'll see why in a minute. Let's see this. Okay, again, we talked about the law, but I found another thing going through this. They not only the law, but then there's an oral law. I was like, what? You know, I've never, I was looking back and forth, and they have this oral law too, on top of their regular written law, on top of the Talmud and the books written down. But obviously, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, those books contained all the law. And that's what they needed, but they also then came up with an oral law. What do you think that had to do with? Huh? Tradition? No, I mean, it's true. And is tradition necessarily biblical? Okay. They kind of used the oral law to fill in the blanks that weren't covered, but for their point of view, their favor. So it was like, you know, well, the Pharisees got this oral law thing. They're the teachers, theologians, so they must be right. And everything was slanted, you know, was a slant on what the Pharisees thought for oral history, not necessarily. A lot of times they tried to stay with it. They would not contradict it, but they would edge around it and fill in, you know, it doesn't say this exactly, but oral history says, you know, you can't wear white after Labor Day. Oh, sorry, it's, you know, just that way. Okay, where this came from is they thought, we all know Moses was on Mount Sinai and he got the word, you know, got the 10 Commandments, okay? And then but then they said, Moses sat down for another couple hours and God and him just talked back and forth, and God gave him all this oral stuff. And everybody believed him. So that is where they think that oral history came straight from God to Moses. He just didn't write them down, or God didn't write them down for him. They had to go just trust Moses for passing it down to them by word of mouth. And as funny as that sounds, you got to remember that in ancient time, a lot of people couldn't read and write. And oral tradition, oral history is how a lot of what we know today from back then was passed down, because they didn't, you know, write things there. They couldn't write things down. They didn't know how to, you know, people couldn't read them except for, well, the Pharisees, because they were educated. But the average person couldn't read this stuff. And these were all the old history, you know, before the birth of Christ was basically oral history from all the different tribes and everything all around the world. So, and then, well, of course, their oral history came from God again. So we're cool. We're covered with them. But there's okay, another point. The Pharisees, like I said, they were not Levites. They were not priests. Okay, they were. Another thing about them, weird thing about them, is they were considered the lower class people, the working class people. What do you know about that, Jim? Anything? I just saw several places, and they just said the Pharisees are lower class, and the Sadducees are the...
Yeah, so the Pharisees would have been like the market workers. They didn't necessarily own the businesses. That would have been more the Sadducees, the upper class. Pharisees would have been middle class, working in those markets, but very legalistic with... And the people liked when they worked because they were very seemingly honest when they would work because they wanted to keep all the laws, and so that was brought into the workplace.
Another thing...
That's all I know.
Okay. And another thing, point we'll find out later, is Pharisees really didn't like living under Roman rule. They were against... Huh?
They hated it.
Whereas the Sadducees, we'll find out, didn't mind it so much. But the Pharisees, these are just things to keep in mind, the overall picture of what a Pharisee is. Now, he's talking about Moses and the Ten Commandments. Let's see, here's all the stuff I read. Yeah, there we go. And then there's the Ten Commandments, right?
Yes.
But, as you found out, there are 613 commandments written down. Not the oral history. These are 613 written down. And I looked at, they literally had a list of 613 online, and they gave a chapter and verse for each one of these. So these were not oral, these were not made up. These were actually things that are written in the Pentateuch, you know. And they're crazy. Talk about legalistic, and these people not only tried to keep up the 613, plus they added, that's probably how they got around some of the strictness of the written, was their oral interpretation, and maybe didn't have to quite, well, we can't do it that way because, so we'll do it this way.
Yeah, so it came down to your teacher, right? Like you were saying, Gamaliel teaching Paul, it was his interpretation of those laws that he would hand it down to Paul, being he was one of the strictest teachers of the day. So, yeah, you're right.
And here's what this is. Talmud tells us, in whatever verse that is, there are 613 commandments in the mitzvot. That's what it's called. The 613, if you found them written down someplace, they'd be in the mitzvot. So I got to get that interpreted. I wonder if you can get that plugged in for an app. And as you can see, somebody actually went through, of course, and they figured out there are 248 positive ones and 365 negative ones. Although Talmud did not provide with a list of these, they were put together in later years. And I think it said 200 BC, 280, I'm sorry, they started doing a study and getting these all put together. All right, what one do we have coming up next? Oh, I found this interesting. I was getting a lot of this information from Jewish sites, and they said that the Pharisees, Judaism, are what was practiced basically today. This is they try and emulate the Pharisees' look on things and how the rules they keep and all that. As they can't, because they, like I said, they can't go to the temple, so they have to go to the synagogues. Synagogues are run by the Pharisees. All right, Jesus condemned them for being we talked about that, self-righteous and hypocritical. And the Pharisees are the ones that plotted to kill Jesus because of his popularity. What has that got to, Jesus' popularity, they're not talking about his word or his message, they're talking about his popularity. What were we talking about the Pharisees? They are top dogs. They are, talking about how their pride and everything up in the earlier part. They're very prideful, and they didn't want this guy, or they didn't like this guy coming around saying, we don't need that. Okay? Knocking them down some. So that is really one of their main reasons for trying to kill him, as compared to, they got the other stuff that sounded good, the blasphemy and all those things, but one of the main reasons is that. Okay? The other group we're going to talk about are the Sadducees. And it's like Jim likes to point out, Sadducees what? The Sadducees do not believe in life after death. They did not believe in eternal life. You're dead, you're gone, that's it. Okay? The Sadducees were also, like I said, progressive. They didn't mind the Roman people. They actually embraced some of the Roman culture. Back in those days, it was called the Hellenistic Greek era. It was so popular that when the Romans conquered the Greeks 300 years earlier, this way of thinking and this way of life was so good that, well, we just keep on doing that. And that's where they liked that. They were very big on that. I said, and they didn't mind doing the Roman stuff. They actually adopted some of the cultures and did some of the other things that the Romans do, you know. The other, what?
Where the phrase came from, when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Well, the Romans had a weird way. Well, the Romans conquered lands and left the people in the lands. Babylonians conquered lands and took the people and spread them out all over the place. So, sounds like it. We told the Pharisees, okay, the Sadducees, these were the high class people. These were people that came over in the Mayflower, okay? They tracked their lineage back. The priests here actually were one of the few people that could trace their line back all the way back through captivity in Babylon and exile, and all the way back to Aaron, basically. They were, and so talk about being proud, right? I mean, so this is the point I was making out. The Pharisees were theologians and scribes. The Levites were priests. The Levites were all, the Sadducees were all Levites. So they were of the tribe of Levi, who's, Aaron is their granddad, or Aaron is his grandson. See, like I said, they tried to keep modern, to try up to date. They liked Greek customs, which again is the Hellenistic period. This other part down here, if you look at the zodiacs, for a better way of saying it, these were a line, again, from Levi to Aaron, and these were one of his sons, or grandsons, and these guys could claim, they were one of the few tribes that could claim follow their lineage all the way back to Aaron, through this guy. And the zodiac and the Sadducees actually is a derivation of the zodiac, because I'm saying it so bad, But the Sadducees' names were named after the zodiacs. It's a variation or meaning of sons of a zodiac or something like that. Sadducees were wealthy upper class, we said that. They completely rejected the law, so that'll bring things up with the Pharisees, right? Their lives revolved around the temple because they were actually of the tribe of Levi, and they were allowed in the temple, whereas the Pharisees weren't. So there's another thing going on. You're not from our tribe, then you can't come in here. Only we can come in here, right?
So you can imagine the infighting, right?
Yeah,
amongst the Jewish people.
Just that part,
Yeah, just that part alone would have caused
the people they tried to follow. We like their teaching, but we got to make a sacrifice to go over here, so we got to follow these guys, make nice with these guys. There's Hellenistic Jew information again, and they like the Roman civilization, Greco-Roman civilization rules. Here's the other part I was talking about. They said they didn't mind, the Romans so much. Look at the last line. Shall I crucify your king? The high priest replied, we have no king except Caesar. Can you imagine a Jew saying that? That's just crazy. Another tidbit about the Sadducees, the high priest was not just one person for this length of time until he died. It was like the whole family. So dad's this year, next year it'll be junior, next year it'll be junior, next year it'll be, and then it'll come back around to dad again type thing. They held the position for a year or so. It could rotate down. There wasn't just one, oh my gosh, high priest.
I may not be remembering correctly, but I think I am. The Sadducees had the Sanhedrin with the high priest, I think, right?
He was the high priest of, there was just one high priest.
But then the Sanhedrin was the
of the 70 of
the 70 high priests. Yeah,
right.
The 70 upper class priests, yeah. So the influence, you just think about that influence of that 70 over the sect of that. It just like...
Well, what I saw that was...
Yeah, that's good.
The one I saw was the Sadducees and Pharisees were in the Sanhedrin. Okay. And the high priest was a tiebreaker if it was like Democrat and Republican.
Yeah, I love it.
The vice president gets to make the, type thing. I might be wrong on that. If
I
you're
think you're correct. I could be wrong. So.
I literally just take this stuff out and print it down. Sanhedrin, okay, we know who they were in there. What do we know about the life of Christ in the Sanhedrin? That's where the trials took place, okay? That's where they were the ones that wanted to get rid of Jesus. The high priest at that time was Annas. Ananias? Sounds close. Yeah, he was the high priest, and he was the one, these were the ones that said, let's get him over to the Romans.
Lee, you are correct. It was made up of both.
Okay, great. And here's just the verses out there showing what went on at that part. Sanhedrin's claim to fame. These are the ones, that bound him and sent him over to the Romans. That's a fun time. Okay. Now we got the Sanhedrin, Sadducees and Jesus having a little discussion. What did we say the Sadducees did not believe in? One of the afterlife, okay? So they thought they would trick Jesus, okay? And this is the part where they said, Marge and Tim are married, but Tim dies, but he has another brother. So his brother can marry Marge and they have children. But his brother died, so Marge has to marry the next. There were 7 guys in Tim's family. And she married all 7 of them. Now we die and go to heaven, go to your heaven, because there's life after death. Whose husband is she? That was their trick. That was their question. Okay, and he said, what did he say? He said, "You're stupid," basically.
Yeah.
It's Lee for paraphrase. He called them stupid because they didn't understand what heaven was like, because they didn't really read that much. They didn't talk to the Pharisees, so they didn't. And he explained to them, there is no marriage in heaven, so that your point is moot. Okay? Now this one, the next one is, I love this one. Look at this verse here and see if you can figure out how she shoots them down completely and totally, quoting an Old Testament verse. It took me a minute to see it. And I went back again and said, what? Oh, there it is. Ah! Take the button. Anybody want to take a guess? It's in there plain as day. This is how Jesus shut them down totally on their life after death and resurrected life.
Where he says, have you not read? Or are you thinking of just before that, or are you thinking I am?
English phraseology. There we go again. So stop that. Yeah. Okay, just simple English. I mean, Jim and John can go into eschatology and all kinds of big fancy words here. I went into am and was. If he said, I was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, what would that imply? But he says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's implying that they are still alive. It slid over. He's not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the crowd heard this, they went nuts. He said, hey, those Pharisees got something going. And this just shot down their whole entire argument right there. I thought it was pretty cool. Just on the little bit of English. Let's see.
No wonder why they got furious, right?
Well, yeah, he shot down. I mean, how can you? They didn't.
Yeah.
And like he quoted Old Testament to them, so it wasn't like he said it. He was quoting Old Testament to them, and I'm sure he used the proper pronouns and tense and sex and all that, whatever you are for was and am, So that was. I thought that was a cool way to end. That's where I'm ending on is this part. Next time I got is like the Damascus Road and some things that associate. We'll get back into Paul. But like I said, you know how when John speaks and he goes down a rabbit hole and goes off, well, I did that, but I just made it into my lesson plans. I just thought, well, I'm not going to go down there. Well, hey, look, these are cool points. But yeah, I like that last one, that am and was thing just stood out and beat me over the head like crazy.
Yeah, you're so rightly, and you think about how that just shattered their whole religious system.
Yeah, I mean,
and how Jesus, through the Scripture, with what he said, can do that with today's religions of just a couple words. He can just slam the door shut on those things through the Scripture, right? And people say, I try to do good works. No, your works like filthy rags.
Right.
I try to be or you're a good religious person. Well, that's just a filthy rag. And he can just, with a few words, just shut that whole thing down and shatter. But think of that. Your whole worldview, your whole belief system shattered by I am. Wow. That's a good one.
And there's another little point. Going to the Paul thing, I said we probably won't be meeting next week, so I gave the one I thought very interesting in there, and it said, it was talking about how the Lord chose Paul. He said, ding, Paul, and Paul, yeah, what? And he told him to go there, and he did. And a lot of people say Paul didn't have free will. Paul couldn't say no. But Christians can say no. Just take a look at Jonah. He said no and ran the other direction. He didn't just say no. So Paul could have said no if he wanted to this, commands the Lord, but he thought there was something there. It was just an interesting point. I said, hey, Paul, I kept looking at it. People say he didn't have a choice. God told him to go and he had to go. No free will. And then I thought back, all the other. I remember we made the point earlier about all the other people that God talked to. Moses, I don't want to. I can't talk. I can't. He's telling God no. Okay? And these were believers, So this non-believer, why would he, if it didn't have free will, if he had free will, he could have just, I don't think, I've just spent my whole life persecuting you. You see my toll back there? I got my score sheet, feeling pretty good. Going to Damascus, I got a line on another 30. My score would go up a whole bunch, But he didn't. He went exactly where the Lord told him to go, and the rest is history, as they say. So, okay, well, thank you for your time. Hope you got something out of it.
And you had people watching you online, too.
Oh, cool. I wonder if it... Hey, by the way, if anybody's still watching, if this stopped and buffered a whole lot while we were watching, just let it go and log back in about an hour, and it'll be all downstreamed, and the buffering will be gone, and you'll have a good straight picture of me dropping the microphone and things like that.